Okay, so I did have I guess it's like a little bonus question because
Okay.
this is something that me and my friends have kind of been talking about with like this social media era, and everything's just kind of like, oh, pressure and intense and
Mhm.
all that type of jazz. So, one of the questions that have been circulating is, do you think it's possible to organize? I'm going to put it in these words, but do you think it's possible to organize Black Panther style nowadays with the
Mm.
way we like work through society and that type of thing?
Sure, I think that's a really good question. I think what would make me the most curious about it, and we kind of were chatting, my castmates and I were kind of chatting about this yesterday, where folks don't live in community the same way they used to,
Hmm.
right? Like, because we can distance ourselves, because we have been so conditioned to live online and also consider those spaces the most real spaces, even though they're very curated and more often than not fake. I think organizing to the level of like the that of the Black Panther movement, or even the earliest iterations of the civil rights movement, and all of those like groups of people and communities of people, it was always on a very local level, and we don't exist on local levels that way. So like if I went back home to like my own personal community, sure, I think those communities, those pockets still exist, and oftentimes they're led by our elders, and figuring out how do we do that kind of, not a transference of power, but passing the baton and making sure that younger folks are raised up in a way that they can take over and be a part of that kind of leadership and maintaining those community circles. I think it exists very presently in communities like Southside Chicago. People don't talk about it though, right? Because everyone's always trying to propagandize the violence, and the pain that exists in that community. But there are incredible, very localized community leaders there that do have these mass like kind of organizations. Ferguson, work like from people like Tamika Mallory, like people who can organize on a local community level. I think exists, but it doesn't get a lot of shine because that's not poppy enough for mainstream social media. That's not the kind of shit that goes viral. We live in a very individualist state,
Yeah,
and so I think I think not only is it possible, it exists. It's just we can't see it.
right.
You know what I mean?
Very important pointing that out, the visibility aspect of it, because oftentimes it seems like if people can't see it, they think it must not be. And that's
Then
just
it don't exist.
yeah, right. I'm like, that's just simply not the case. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really important. And I also think back to back in the day when they had like hubs and like like a space of fellowship where the
Mm-hmm.
community would come together locally, and it was designated. And
Yep.
also
And it was regular.
yeah, and
Like
it was regular.
it happened always.
Yeah.
And I find that it's been really interesting to see how and if and when it's possible to create those spaces in like the Broadway and theater community in New York, where it's like, how do we give ourselves hubs where we can like emphasize our creativity, but also highlight where we want to go and not just the problems that we have with our industry, the world, etc. How can we create spaces and opportunities for us to just fellowship together? How
Yeah.
do we do that? What does it look like? Who's organizing? Who's paying for it? Who's
Right.
funding it?
What
Where are
are
we
the
hosting it?
resources?
Who are we inviting into the room? That's always the question for me. Is like, how do we make room for everybody, rather than maintaining these kind of, like I said earlier, individualist and elitist structures that keep the door shut for folks who want to be a part.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And sometimes I think about, because I'm a very avid documentary watcher, and sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
think about how when they're telling stories about, I don't know why I thought of this, but when they're telling stories about cults, for example, I just
Sure.
wonder where do where do these people get these resources, and why can't we get these types of resources for doing.
A lot of times they get them from each other. I mean, I think about my New York church cult adjacent experience, right? They were getting their resources from people like me.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have like $19 in my bank account and give them 18 of them dollars to tithe.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we have our like vision builders gala and stuff. Ooh, I call it, dang, people gonna know what church I'm talking about. My fault. But when we have our little, gala or whatever, it's fine. It's not that deep. But I remember giving like $500 that I did not have.
Wow.
Right? It's like a lot of times we are the people that are resourcing the thing. A lot of the times it's the folks who are maybe the most disenfranchised in these spaces that have such a deep belief and such a deep desire to be a part, to connect, to be in this kind of communal situation. There's this really cool book. It's called The Cult of Fanaticism. That kind of talks about the way we pedestalize and kind of idolize like figures, ideas, images, concepts to such an extent in westernized society that we're willing to give our everything. I can't tell you how much money I would even give like Justin Bieber. You know what I mean? Church. You know what I mean? I get it. So I get it. When people are like in these big ass cults like Nexium and stuff, it's like, oh, it's very simple. All you have to do is believe in the thing.
Yeah, and
All you have to do.
there are often promises associated with that. Like, if you believe, then X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
And
But things that I think yield towards the concepts of like radical liberation, transformative justice, restorative justice, it's not that it's harder to believe. It's just that folks with closer proximity to power, um, they can have a more distant investment. You know, we all in 2020 saw our Venmo accounts just randomly pop off on Juneteenth in 2020. But that hasn't been made into like a cultural regular thing. Like, sure, we might get $10, $15, $25 every now and then, but it's not something that folks are so invested in that they're like legitimately making a case and a cause for reparations and what it might look like in their communities, what it might look like on a federal level, what, like, you know what I mean? So I think conceptually, when we don't have vested benefit from it, or we can't connect ourselves to like, this is the promise that I have on the other side of this, then like people can be a little further like, oh, that's cool, that's cute, nice.
That is so true, because people are always selfish underneath it. For the most part, it's like, what is this going to provide me in the long run? For a lot of people, not to generalize everyone across the board, but for a lot of people, it's like
there's a culture of transaction.
Right, exactly. And with that, I want to introduce us. So, hello, welcome to 23, 24, 25, a podcast about being slapped in the face by not only 2023, but also by the wildly complicated transition that is turning 25. I'm your host, Joska, and I've invited my friends to the pod to talk with me about life as baby adults. And today I'm joined by MiKayla, a really good friend, collaborator, and just an inspiration to me. I'm really grateful that you're joining me today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this space and trusting me to have this conversation and just be humans at the same time.
Of course, and I think it's really important, not just for the people listening, although I'm grateful to be able to share this, but for me in this time of my life right now, I feel like life is evolving way faster than I'm evolving as a human sometimes.
It's hard to keep up.
It is hard to keep up. And I'm just like, I want to make sure that I am giving back as much as I can, because giving back is not only to satisfy my own feelings, it makes everyone around me feel like they can rise up and feel like they can like have peace of mind out here living life. I'm just like, it's hard out here. So
Yeah, it's also nice to not feel alone in the
yeah,
chaos of everything.
right. And just like that push and pull of, oh, I came from this, I grew up from this. You had mentioned something in terms of your questions about younger self, which we'll get to later, but I was just thinking about how coming from one thing and then always being encouraged to go to another place or be better than your parents' generation. And like my parents used to have this thing where they would always say, you have to be better than the generation before you. Like every generation has to get better, and
Right.
there's it's understandable, and I understand, and I see what the the ask, I guess, is. Also, it feels like a lot of pressure sometimes when the world is changing so much
Mm-hmm.
to ways we are not expecting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we will definitely get into all this. First, I want to start off with a little icebreaker, which is MySpace top five, which is basically MySpace top eight. I mean, come on. I don't know if you were on MySpace back.
I was. I was technically not allowed, but my mom had a MySpace, but she didn't really know how to use. I grew up in the era of like we didn't have computers. Like, I wasn't born with computers, and so once we like finally bought our first family computer and MySpace was a thing, I had to make my mom's MySpace, but I wasn't allowed to have one.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I just changed the name from Trina Bartholomew to MiKayla Bartholomew. And I started like bringing all my friend requests over and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I know my space like the back of my hand. Shout out Tom. Shout out Tom.
That's so funny because I was really young and I was just figuring out how to use like the big monitor computer that was just like on the
Sure. He was
basement.
over there playing pinball.
Right, literally playing pinball. And you didn't even need internet for these types of things back in the day.
No,
Like,
you could legitimately do things. Microsoft Word used to come with your computer. It wasn't a software you had to buy.
and then everyone was like, "Oh, we can make money if everything is a subscription," and
Jesus Christ. And here we are
that's the hell we're living in
paying for
today.
Apple Care. Paying for Apple Care, Zoom, and Canva. Shit.
It's exhausting, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, how do I keep track? Rocket money? No, I'm just kidding.
But it's true. Shout out Rocket Money. Not an ad, but I'm
Right?
sure
Yeah.
it's open and available and interested. Cut her a deal.
Exactly, and it really comes in clutch. So that's no lies there. But yeah, this MySpace top five game is just a shorter variation of MySpace top eight in terms of time and all that. And to me, it's always easier to come up with five things than eight or 10 things. So
That's
um,
fair.
this list can have whatever you want, like things that you were really inspired from growing up, um, musicians, inspirational characters, any people, like anything that really really solidified a part of you and like a part of your growth. It can be related to activism. It could be related to yourself and like how you move as a person now. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about my top five, it was interesting. One, thinking about it as an actor who's currently on strike and has a very curated list of what she's allowed to say. I was like, oh, you know what's really cool? Because something I've been jostling with quite a bit is the notion that for the last few years, my identity has felt so wrapped up in my career that I forget that there's a world elsewhere. There are people elsewhere. There are things that have influenced me beyond the confines of being an actor. And so the first person that came to my mind for my top five is my baby sister, Maya. She is one of the most fascinating creatures I've ever met. She and I could not be any more different. We're about 6 years apart in age, and I remember growing up, I used to have this huge resentment about having a little sister because we were always forced to dress the same. Whatever I got, she got. She always wanted to come over. She always wanted to be right behind me or hanging out with my friends, and it used to piss me off. One, because I didn't want my sister tagging around. Two, she was mean. It was me. She was one of them kids who, like, you playing punch bug, you don't punch back. I punch her light, she start crying. I get in trouble, she's laughing. You know what I mean? She used to bite people for fun. Uh, but I was an absolutely awful older sister, probably for the first 18 or so years. Not that I was like deliberately vindictive or vile or unkind to her. I just didn't care for her or in the way that I should have as an older sister. I took for granted the opportunity that I was given to have kind of a best friend built in to my family structure. And it shifted pretty intensely once I got to college because my mom was really sick. And so while I was away at school, my little sister at the age of like 12 or 13 had to take on the responsibility of being my mom's caretaker because my dad was overseas and I went to school like 2 hours away and could only come home but so often or if there was an emergency. And it shifted the way I thought about how important she was because my mother would not have survived without my little sister, and I also don't think I would have survived without her. So she's gonna be in my top five. Whenever like I'm doing an interview or press, and they're like, "Who inspires you? Who's your role model?" I'm like, "Oh, my baby sister, Maya. Easy, okay? She about that action. She hood as fuck. She got way more common sense than I ever would. She's funny as hell, and she cute. And the older she gets, the more she looks like me. And honestly, good for her, because I'm gorgeous. You know what I mean?"
Yes.
So she's in my top five. I would say the great Maya Angelou as well, because fun story. I wandered off from my mom in the middle of a hotel when I was like maybe 2 or 3 years old, just disappeared. Just gone, baby, gone. And I guess I found my way out to the parking lot. My mom's freaking out, looking all around this hotel for her daughter, and none other than Maya Angelou brings me back in her arms. She's carrying me in. She was doing like a conference in Norfolk. And she hands me, she was like, "Is this your baby?" But, in the Maya Angelou,
Baby.
you know? And my mom's like gobsmacked, like, uh, uh, I know why the cage bird sings. She's like, yes. She was like, "You have a beautiful daughter." And I just thought that was like a fun story. And then I also think about the way her words have influenced my life, have popped up in my life. I also always think about how I am often ashamed to say that I'm a writer. And so it's been so interesting to get older and kind of value and cherish that moment of connection because it was almost like her touch on my life actually had a lot to do with where I would end up, universally speaking. Um, my mentor, Dr. T, is number three. Would not have graduated college without that woman.
Yes.
She taught me accountability. And she taught me accountability in real time by making me hold myself to a higher standard than I was willing to hold myself to as a disgruntled, traumatized, struggling college student. And I'll never forget the day she told me that she didn't think I was taking one of her courses seriously. And it's a class that only like maybe 7 or 8 people get to take every year. And she has to give you permission to take the class. And she didn't think I deserved to be in it anymore, that I wasn't committing or pouring in as much as my other classmates were pouring in. And so she made me, this probably sounds more aggressive than it actually was, but as a offer of radical accountability to my classmates, I had to write a letter stating why I would like to stay in that class, what I wanted to do to change the way I was engaging with the course, and what my plan was if I fell short of what I was promising the class, and asked permission to stay. And I'll never forget that moment. It changed how I show up to every process. And I love that lady to death. I've worked with her professionally a couple times recently in the last few years, and I mean, she's like a third grandmother to me. Um, The fourth would be a book that I'm recently obsessed with called Sex and the Single Woman, which is an anthology series that takes the writings of 24 different writers from all different backgrounds, sexual identities, ethnic makeups, race, religions, like everybody you could find. But I believe all of them are femme-identifying people. And it's reimagining Helen Gurley Brown's Sex and the Single Girl, which was written, I want to say, in the 1950s or 60s. I just finished it, and it changed my perspective of what singlehood looks like. And I recommend that. And I don't want to say anything more than that. I want people to go read it. Like, go read it.
Reading it. Consider
it's good. Sex and the Single Woman. Yeah, it was really cool. And for a book that was kind of put together and organized by two white women, they did a fantastic job of making sure their community looked like the global majority, which was really fucking dope. And I remember I was opening the book, and you know how they have those quotes at the beginning of a book?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, this book is so good, signed by this bitch that wrote this book.
Right, yeah.
Emma Gray, who is a podcaster, the host of the Love to See It podcast with Claire Fallon, was one of the quotes up there. And I have actually been on Emma's podcast.
Wow.
Because it's a reality television bachelor focused podcast. And so they had me and my former co-host on when we were still hosting the Blackchelorettes to kind of talk about our work and also recap an episode. I was like, oh, I can trust this. I could tell I could trust this work because I trust that person to stand behind it. And then the last of my top 5 that had influenced me, probably musically, is going to be Patti LaBelle. I just remember growing up in a household that was filled with music. And I was pretty sheltered growing up, but my parents never sheltered me from music or culture, the things that they love. And I'll never forget just always being so obsessed with her as a child. And that's a voice that I can just carry in the back of my mind always. And there's nothing like having the voice of an elder that you can carry with you, you know?
Yes, for sure. I love Patti LaBelle.
Me too. And you know someone else that I love, who's another like Black icon and legend, Loretta Devine.
Oh, Loretta Devine.
Baby, I just saw her in Pal Joey, the invited dress.
Hey,
this past week. Put the show on Broadway and give her Tony. Do it right now.
I need to see Pal Joey like a minute ago when I was still living in New York. When I was working at Tara Rubin Casting.
Yeah.
Put me on one of the like in-person audition days where Savion Glover was teaching the dancers like the combination and stuff.
Yeah.
I was sitting there like, this is something else. I already know. I want to see
There's something in there. Shout out to my girl Aisha for eating that stage the fuck up. Miss Divine for being divine. Every time she came on stage, I could breathe again. Like I could take a deep cleansing breath, and her comedic time, just to be able to watch legends do the thing
effortlessly too.
So call it top 6 because I can't get that lady out my mind.
I love it. I appreciate the bonus. I appreciate the bonus for real because Loretta Devine, Dreamcast.
Like always been that girl. You know what I mean? Like always been.
Always been for a while, like
for a baby. Girl, you know, like what?
Yeah. We're Loretta fan club right now.
Huge fan.
I totally love that. So I'm just thinking back about what you said a little bit too about your sister, because I also have a younger sister, and I was the youngest before she was born. And similar thing where I was so weird about it, like in terms of I did not like the fact that we were dressed in the same clothes. And actually she's going to be a guest for the family episode of the podcast, so I'm excited for that.
I
Things have
recorded a podcast episode with my sister once, and that was hilarious. We had like stolen a bottle of tequila from our mom and just sat in the car, like outside our grandma's house, getting drunk off our ass, talking about life. So I hope you have so much fun recording that episode.
sounds amazing. Y'all had a little key. Yeah.
We had a little key, and I'm sure you and your sister gonna have a time as well.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's been lovely just like being like realizing where I've grown from my mistakes as a person, being like, it would I know she's making her own mistakes as a human, but sometimes I'm just like, if I could just give her just like a little piece of what I wish I would have known.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, because sometimes you go through something, it's like, ew, nobody should have to go through that. Like,
Yeah. No, I
somebody you
get you.
love, but yeah,
But
you
it's
get
like you know you make your mistakes in hopes that like you can use those as opportunities for your siblings to learn from them, and also when they inevitably make their own mistakes, you can offer like a little guidance, like, okay, well, I know what this looks like.
yeah,
Let me help you through it the best I can.
exactly. And I'm like, she's like 4.5 years younger than me, and then
Okay.
yeah, sometimes I'm like, I don't have to worry about like me missing something in terms of an experience and like her feeling like she is lost or if it's something because I believe even if you have a close relationship with your parents, you do need other like you need other people around, other
Yeah,
mentors, other family members to confide in or to just like seek
for sure.
solace sometimes. So I'm just like it's a good separation of age and it's also a good separation of experiences to come together and like sometimes she reminds me of where I was and what I was doing, what I could have done, what I've admired about my own evolution. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, we so that was beautiful too. I love a good sister on the top 5 list.
Yeah, same here. She's always gonna be on my top 5, and she'll always be the first person I mention when someone's like, "Who's inspired you?" That little nigga Maya Loren, man.
Yeah, sister, day one.
For
So I'm going to go ahead and move us towards the questions because
sure.
I'm really excited. We both have questions to ask each other. We'll start off with mine and then after you answer them, you can ask me some things so we can be in
Yeah.
community in this space. So my first question is as an artist with a significant social media presence, how do you navigate the issue of performative allegiance on social media? And what
Mhm.
strategies do you employ to ensure your online advocacy is effective, interactive, and meaningful?
I really like this question, particularly because it's something that I'm grappling with currently, where I'm trying to reimagine my relationship to social media. I am in the process when I'm currently working on a new play. And as I was heading into like once I got the offer, I was like, I wonder what it would be like to like not really have a social media presence for once while I was working on a show. And I started thinking about this back in maybe August of 2023, around the time I got the offer. And we started rehearsals on October 10th. So I flew out here like October 7th. And when I got out here, obviously that was around the time where the violence and Hamas made the attack at the music festival in Israel. And I knew that people were going to have something to say about the fact that I wasn't engaging on social media the way I usually am. And I had to figure out how I could make peace for that because what I didn't want to do was perform or play a game that would further inspire harm, would potentially spread misinformation, would have me leveraging my labor and my platform when other voices need to be amplified and uplifted. Uh, and also was tired of social media. So I set a timer. Where's my phone? Where I can actually only get on Instagram for 5 minutes a day. And right now, it's unlocked, right? But the very first thing, because I didn't use my full 5 minutes today, which honestly, so impressed. Good for me for not clicking on the app. But the very first thing that pops up on my sensitive content, and I know exactly what the post is probably, unfortunately, going to be the body of a dead child. And I was trying to figure out how can I make space to engage in advocacy on a more practical, real world level. How can I engage directly with resources that are helping folks on the ground, that's helping Palestine, that's sending letters to Congress in regards to like supporting the release of the hostages, that's helping send actual aid to Gaza, to the Palestinians. How can I educate myself so I know what the fuck I'm talking about? And I think that kind of performative practice or the performative activism that exists on Instagram is kind of hard to get rid of, and I don't want to play that game. I don't want to play it when it comes to my industry. I don't care. I don't want to play it when it comes to the kind of work we amplify in our industry. I don't want to play it when it comes to myself. If I'm not having a good time with life, like I want to be able to actually engage with people authentically and build community, and also make room for the humanity that I hold and the humanity that other people hold, and know that it's not a perfect practice. So for now, I'm just not using Instagram like I used to, right? Unless I can be on it intentionally, unless I can take my time to divest from the ways in which the foundational elements of white supremacy influence the way I show up on social media, I'm not engaging with it. And it's been really hard to kind of sit with that. Even when talking about certain shows or work, I remember recently I was kind of accused of, I guess not accused, but I was questioned by like an artist friend of mine about a post I had made about Pearly Victorious, the show that's currently on Broadway. They felt that my statement didn't fall in line with my actual experience with the show, and I disagreed. They're like, I feel like you were too nice. I was just like, no, I think I was incredibly honest and very transparent that like this show brought up a lot of questions for me. I'm very curious about how white bodies engage with stories that are centered around the Black experience, particularly when satire doesn't show up in space as satire because white people don't get it. Or because like the direction or the production is showing up in a certain way so that it can be palatable, I think, for white audiences who are the main demographic of Broadway spaces, and also it really fucks with a lot of that production as well, right? Some of the performances are, I think, some of the most interesting that I've seen on a stage in the last few years, and I do believe the show is making room. And I think I said all of that in my piece, but because I didn't say it the way someone would have preferred, because my language or the way I speak, I guess, sometimes comes off nicer than it is, or seems like it's trying to give people a pass, or because I'm actually trying to engage in critical analysis rather than like a call out or a call in, right? I'm trying to get people to engage. I want to be able to have conversations about this kind of stuff. And so if I can present it that way, if I can present it the way I speak it, the way I live it, and I feel like that should be okay. Because everybody's going to have something to say about how we engage on Instagram. So my goal right now is when I engage on social media, whatever platform it is, I want to know that I'm being honest and I am reflecting the truth of my experience. And if people can meet me where I'm at, great. It's my page. You a guest here. Welcome to the family. You know what I mean? As soon as you leave a comment, baby, let's talk. let's get into it. And I think that's where the most meaningful connections, some of my most meaningful friendships have come out engaging that way on social media. So yeah, I'm just trying to be a little more mindful, and I'm trying not to, no disrespect to anybody that follows me on social media, not take heed of everybody's opinion, because everybody got something to say, and at the end of the day, it's my page. If you don't like the way I engage, unfollow me or block me or get blocked.
Hey, yeah.
You know?
Big retweet. And that's something that I literally have been coming up against lately, which is why I'm glad I asked this question. It's important for me to, I think it's just like important for the repetition to hear from people to be like, the reality of it is this is your voice.
Yeah.
These people, like you said, everybody is always going to have something to say. Your life is still going to continue.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like, I've just been like, fuck it. I'm just not on here. And you might be upset about that right now. I remember someone was pissed off because I had posted about, free Palestine. They were like, oh, but you wasn't saying you wanted to take a break off of Instagram a couple weeks ago when Israel was being attacked. And I was like, actually, that's not true. I announced that I wanted to take that break. And then that's when I found out what was going on and still was leveraging and amplifying resources for both Palestinians and Jewish folks. So don't bring that over here, because Islamophobia is not new, anti-blackness is not new, and anti-Semitism isn't new here either. And one thing you're not going to do is demand the labor of a black person. When you over here posting about Taylor Swift's 1989, we're not doing that. So, like, either you can engage with me thoughtfully and we can have a conversation and we can exchange resources that we think might be helpful to amplify and support the needs of people who are actually suffering on the ground, or you can get off of Instagram. Because guess what? Our work exists beyond the confines of the grid and the 24-hour expiring stories. And we get so wrapped up and what social media does, how we look, how we're coming off to these people that have actual, like, the power to decide what kind of access to capital we have, what kind of access we have to live and breathe and be and exist in this space and do work and drink water and all that kind of shit. And on top of that, we got to be a human. We got family shit that's going on.
Right.
On top of that, we got bills to pay because we're adults. Some of us have private student loans that have never been frozen. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
You know what I mean? My mother just got out of the hospital, and my grandmother just had an unexpected surgery. God forbid we're having conversations about amputations and assisted living. Like, social media is curated to look a very specific way. And it's hard to be meaningful in a space that doesn't make room for humanity in the first place.
Woo.
So
true.
As someone who prioritizes liberation, I'm trying to learn how to remove my obsession with the thoughts of others and be more concerned with how I can pour into the communities that I want to be a part of, the communities that I am a part of, and how I can also be poured into. Because as someone who wants to pursue liberation, I can't do it if I'm not sustaining myself.
Exactly. Because
none of us can.
How is it going to continue if we're not here?
Exactly.
We have to come together. And I'm thinking about how, because I know someone else who had a similar situation with someone in their DMs about how they were posting about free Palestine, and I'm sitting here like, first of all, let's rewind it back, because the Palestinian struggle did not start on October 10th of this year. If you're trying to come at me, where were you in 2014? Where were you in 2010?
Yeah, what? And a lot of us, if we're thinking about how old we were in those times, you know what I mean? Like, in 2010, I was watching That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, and singing High School Musical.
Right.
High School Musical 2, I think.
Fact is, it's social media that's making people like put on, like, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And
this is how you have to engage. And if you don't engage with liberation my way, then you're doing it wrong. And it's like, what?
Absolutely not. Nonsense.
nonsense. And that's the whole thing. It's like, how do we make room? That's always the thing that I come back to. I'm trying to learn how to make room for folks who have different um, ideologies as me, have different thought processes as me, have different beliefs and value standards as me, so that I can be more informed to make room for other people and to be more empathetic, even for the niggas that I don't fuck with.
Yeah, Barack Obama just said something about this the other day. I don't know if you caught that little interview clip. He was talking
Mm-mm.
about the fact that we're all pretty much complicit because a lot of us don't listen truly to the other side that we disagree with.
Yeah.
Because once we listen, the fact is, once we listen to each other, these people that we're fighting against are the help we need to fix the problem. So
Mm,
once we start listening to each other, we can actually get to some sort of understanding as to why people are thinking the way they're thinking and what we can do to actually address the because when we come down to, especially for genocide, the fact is we don't want genocides to be happening. Like whole
like it
tribes of
just
people are
shouldn't
not
be
supposed to be
happening.
wiped out. Like that's
Yes.
not. So let's start there,
Let's
and then
start there.
these people.
Can we even agree? Like, we can't even get to a space where we can all agree, like, that's what we're watching happen.
Right? Yes, I'm
Right?
just like
Because so many people are caught up in what they think is supposed to be, what they
exactly.
think is right, what they heard, what information they have access to. And there's no willingness to meet people where they, I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Me too. I'm just like, let's start with why don't you think this is a genocide? And
Yeah.
like my mode of my modus operandi, or however you would say it, I am Socrates or Aristotle. Sorry, I think it's Aristotle who likes to ask all the questions. I will
Mm-hmm.
question somebody into the ground
Yeah,
because
sure.
I really love listening, and I really want to know, like, how did you get there? How did you
Mm-hmm.
arrive?
Right.
What about your environment might have influenced this as well? I think that's
Yeah,
a big part of it because sometimes people feed certain things to you and you forget that you never had the source to begin with. So
precisely.
it's like that's not even helpful moving
Yeah.
forward. You have to go to the source, and yeah,
Figure out what it is.
we could talk about this one all day. Let's get to the next question.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
The next question is, how do you personally find the balance between taking care of your own well-being when a social or economic event deeply affects you, but the need to engage with your community in meaningful conversations and actions related to the event is still present? You kind of answered this, but what strategies or principles guide your approach to this delicate balance? If you
Sit
have
in my down. It's something that has been an I say this as I'm choking on an ice cube,
oh, bless your
but
heart.
learning how to sit down and rest and put myself in spaces that are centered around joy has been really big for me, really hard for me this year. The last 2 years have been pretty rough physically on my body, and I've never slowed down long enough to recuperate or recover. And so, something that I think has been incredibly helpful for me right now is one, not really having a presence on social media. Two, protecting my energy in ways where I'm very specific about who I'm interacting with on a regular basis, um, which has been interesting because I realize how small my circle is through that. And then also having to take a step back from wanting to do all of the things and just trying to survive and just making room for being like, you know what, today you woke up and that might be all you can do. You might just have to get through the day and see if you make it to the other side and being okay with that, which has been um, very hard. And then working on things that I actually believe in. I have been somehow in my producer bag this year quite a bit, which has been really interesting to realize. I was sitting with a good friend. I look at her like a big sister to me, but her name is Adrienne. And she is an artist in the Broadway community, but first and foremost, she is a human being that prioritizes the care and well being of others in a way that I've never really seen before. And it's such a wonderful honor to be in community with her. And I remember one night she told me, she was like, no, you'd be a fantastic producer. In fact, producing is kind of what you do at BAC, which is an organization that I work with, the Broadway Advocacy Coalition. She was like, and we've been doing that with us for years. And I was like, really? It's just never what we've called it. I just, it's always like, no, I show up, or I help plan, or I help build the curriculum, or I help develop the program, or I help run the day, or I help facilitate the course, or whatever the heck. And she's like, yeah, nah, you be in your producer bag. And so recently we had the second annual Arts in Action Festival. And that process, we worked on it from June until, September 10th and 11th was when the actual festival happened. And I was just focused on making the best experience for the folks who were going to come in as possible. And it was deeply restorative for me. It was deeply transformational for me. My only goal, the goal wasn't even execution, right? The goal wasn't even the product. It was, how sacred can I make this process so that whatever comes out on the other side will be received by the person who needs it when they receive it. And I think doing that in like little ways and little spaces have been my tiny kind of revolutions to help me prioritize my personal well-being so I can reframe how I enter into space, how I take up space, and sitting my ass down and making sure I rest when before I have no choice. You know what I mean?
Before, right.
Before I have no choice.
It's good to catch it, because burnout is something serious.
Yeah, and then also accepting that, sometimes we don't have control over the very thing. I'm someone who likes to know what's next. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily type A, but I love a plan. I love to know what's coming up. I love to have something on the horizon. And right now I have absolutely nothing, and I'm terrified, but I'm trying to find peace in the midst of that terror. Because, me 5 years ago would have begged to live a life like this. And I just have to let things come as they will and remove the things that I think are causing me more harm than good. Because it changes how I can invest in myself and how I can invest in those around me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something serious when you take care of yourself and see the benefits of it, see the fruit of that labor. Because sometimes it really does feel like labor, just taking care, even resting.
It is.
I feel like
rest is labor.
Rest is labor. Rest is a birthright, and it's also, in today's world, it's labor, y'all.
It takes so much work, and it can be so dangerous sometimes to choose the radical choice of rest. It's a radical act.
It is.
And it's scary, it feels like you're missing out. It feels like you're going to lose out on something. You're going to miss your chance.
I have big FOMO.
Yeah, very big FOMO. And it's something that I realize, like I said, the last 2 years have been very difficult. This year especially has been hard. Life is bleak. Life is looking bleak. And I also recognize that the world is looking bleak. Everything's on fire, and not in like cute fire and flames and fire kind of. Everything is on fire. Things are going to shit. And that's how life has felt for me. And yet, I'm oddly, I think, in the healthiest place mentally I've ever been. Even as things seem to get worse day by day. Like, when I say I am terrifyingly behind on bills,
you're not the only one.
You know what I'm like? When I say, I had to add another $10,000 of debt to my plate this year because I was in a really bad car accident, and I'm still catching up on medical debt.
Yeah. Oh, that is...
My God. and still have not gotten all of the physical care I can because I can't afford health insurance, right? But somehow I feel mentally the most at peace.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the shit is easy, and I'm just like, I'm choosing peace right now. I'm just woosah. No, it's really painful. It feels like parts of me are being ripped off every day. Sometimes I'll wake up in excruciating pain and still have to go to work. Other times I'm like looking at these these calls from collections, like I ain't got it right now. Can we just put another extension on the thing? But I'm like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if this was happening to me, like it technically was like 5 years ago, back when I used to live in New York and I used to split a cup of coffee with my friend because I couldn't afford to buy my own from 7-Eleven. I'm handling it a lot better than I handled that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's very, very real. And it's so eerie to hear, like, this is just a thing, this is just how it is, but it's so eerie to hear the fact that we can't afford health insurance. That just sounds eerie. Like, that just sounds
That's
like it's
crazy.
a given to us.
It don't make no sense.
I just hate it. I went to urgent care a couple weeks ago. I had a really, really bad cold, and I was sitting there like, I have less than a year left on my parents' crappy insurance, but
I'm
at least,
glad you still got it though. All
right,
right,
like, at least it's
take
something.
that last year, baby.
Right, I'm gonna get it, but I'm like, at least it's something. But I just went in there like, what the hell is the point?
Yeah.
A $50 copay for them to give me ibuprofen.
Right.
Could have gone up the street to CVS and
Yeah.
got $5.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
then I paid the $50 for the copay, and then I had to pay
For the ibuprofen.
$50 for the ibuprofen. I'm just like,
My lord. My lord.
but here we are.
That's the strategy though, right? It's like figuring out how to build up our resources and our toolboxes so that we can be well informed from like the trauma, the pain, and the struggles and the strife of our past to deal with the trauma, the pain, the struggles, and strife of our present.
Giving Sankofa.
Yeah, it's giving Sankofa all the time. Go back and get it, baby. Please, please go back.
Yes, I'm like, this is another thing that I could talk about all day. And I feel like the third question that I have for you, I love how you just kind of break things down. The third question I have for you is also something I feel like you talked about a little bit, actually in the beginning when we were talking, but I'm asking, how do you approach the important task of fighting against injustices that may not directly impact your own identity or experiences? What are some effective ways you found to demonstrate solidarity and contribute to the advancement of other marginalized groups and communities?
Shutting the fuck up and listening to the directly impacted. But one of the biggest things that I think gets so fucking forgotten from the resurgence of Black Lives Matter and kind of this new wave of the civil rights movement in 2020 is we kept saying to everybody that we have to listen to those that are being directly impacted by a system or a form of oppression or injustice in order to figure out a way to move towards healing and towards liberation, because they have the answer about the thing that they need, right? And if we're not making room for their voices to be on the main stage, then what are we doing? And at the same time, how are we offering up resources or leveraging our proximity to privilege or power platform when we want to make sure that the onus of that labor doesn't fall like squarely on their shoulders? What is the both and of it all? What is the delicate balance of making room and also taking on the burden of educating ourselves? Right, doing our own research, reimagining who we look to for information, and then when we reimagine it, make it practical, make it real. Right? What's your follower count look like? Like, who are you following on social media? Where are you getting your information from? Who are the first news sources you go to? Are you going to X? You getting on Twitter? for news? Is that what you're doing? Are you vetting your sources? Are you looking who's funding the news articles and the newscasts that you're engaging with, right? Are you only looking at Fox and CNN? Or are you going beyond your, like, local scale? And it's not a perfect practice. Like, I can't say that, like, oh, I'm the best at doing this, like, this, that, and the fourth. It's like, no. I'm struggling with it in real time. I'm struggling with it in real time. And all I can do is give myself grace and ask grace of those who are directly impacted as I figure out what way do you want me to support you right now?
Yeah,
and is it something that's actually rooted in liberation, or is it something that's rooted in our idea or understanding of punitive justice?
Wow.
You know, and then just taking it kind of one step at a time, and then looking to leaders that I trust. I love Brittany Cunningham, who is also on a social media break right now. I think she's only really utilizing Threads. And being able to take heed from a leader like that I trust, and figure out what resources work there. How can I support my friends that are in my life directly?
Yeah.
How am I checking up on people? Not the way we were checked up on in 2020, which wasn't intentionally performative, right? But we were getting hundreds of text messages from miscellaneous white folks in our lives, saying, how are you doing? No, like, for real. Like, what's going on? What do you think of what's happening right now? Is there any way I can, like, practically support you? Do you need to vent? You good? Oh, wait, you're fine, my nigga? Okay, and this is what you think about this? Okay, well, that's really good for me to know. And then challenging the folks in our lives that aren't willing to engage that way, and not challenging them like, you need to be better, but, like, challenging them in a way that encourages them to try something new when it comes to how they engage with community. I had a conversation with my dad about the ongoing conflict, and that felt like a mistake because he's a former military official. And yet it still felt like an incredibly fruitful conversation, because had we not had it, he wouldn't have known my perspective. He would not have known the amount of work and research that I put in, and he also was able to shed a lot of light and information for me about shit that I would have never known about, that I'm not just gonna find on Google. Even though our opinions differ greatly, Jesus Christ.
Those are experiences coming to the table.
Yeah, and even still, it was one of those things where I was able to legitimately challenge him on some things and ask him to reimagine some things. And, he over here telling me to look up the definition of certain words, and I'm like, okay, here's the definition, now let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this definition actually just really fell in line with what I was just trying to explain to you. So what's up? Can you explain what is this? What's the next step here? Logistically, what is our legal responsibility as a country? Like, what's gonna happen? All of that kind of shit. And so, yeah, when looking at issues of the directly impacted and figuring out what our solidarity looks like, I always want to figure out how to be as active as possible without taking up more space than I'm supposed to. And making sure that I'm centering the needs of those who are at the center of that violence, that oppression, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's really important. I like the fact that checking in is a common thread, like checking in with people, making sure that somebody is caring and not just posting a black square. Like, we're getting.
All you're doing is fucking up the algorithm. Shut up.
I'm getting a mixed message here because you're.
And now all your black squares are archived or deleted. So what was the point?
Right. What is the point?
And then we give you the tools and say what we need, but y'all don't want to do that because it would involve dismantling systems of power that you benefit from.
Yeah, true. This is important. Like, when it comes down to it, we're all in this together anyway. We're all here together. We don't have no choice but to be here together. So what's good?
Yeah.
Like, so I really appreciate your answers to these questions, and I'm ready for the questions that you have.
What do you mean you've been listening this whole time and you haven't subscribed yet? I don't see what the holdup is. The button is right there. And while you're at it, follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You obviously like the show.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Excited. So for my first question for you is, what prompts you or drives your artistry in an era of time where content quantity is often prioritized over quality?
Ooh, ain't it though? Ain't it though?
It hurts.
So hearing this question, I was like, I think it's a couple of things. At first, I said making exactly whatever the hell it is that I want to create, and not trying to cater to, not that being my first instinct when I have.
Love that. Yes.
Yeah, when I have a vision or when I'm inspired, my first instinct being like, oh, how can I fit this vision into a mold of what other people would want to see? No,
Mm-hmm.
no, I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if it doesn't make sense to anyone.
You are your own niche, baby.
Exactly. It makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the priority right there.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing was just I've felt this like innate sense of confidence like in myself about my work, and just I say this a lot, but I call it a passion statement, what most people might call a mission
A
statement.
mission statement.
Yeah, so like my passion statement, once I was specific and clear about what that was, and like bringing joy, bringing people together, and showing the dynamicism of how humans operate and how we move through life and connect with each other, I was just like, bet, I already have this confidence in me that is making me feel like this is something that I can do. So it's my responsibility now to not dull it down, to not try to like get it like, and
Right.
that's like the connection to it for me. I feel like I'm in a writers group with my friends, and like in the beginning of our sessions, we always ask, "What is our responsibility as a blank?" You can pick what the question is you want to answer. Sometimes it could be a writer, an artist, an actor, whatever you want to choose.
Yeah.
Last time I did, "What is my responsibility as an artist?" And I feel like that's a really big part of it. Like my responsibility is to do this to the best of my ability, like not rush, take my time, and
Mm-hmm.
just put out what I believe is beautiful and what I believe is in line with my vision. Because
Yeah.
you really just try to cater to what audiences want, and that's really all you're doing with an idea, you're gonna fall flat really, really soon,
Yeah.
really fast.
It's true. It's true. It's a reason why, like, we feel like a lot of the work, a lot of the art that's being amplified or propped up as like the end all be all is so uninspiring.
So uninspiring.
And it's like, how can we make room for our originality, our individuality within the not the confines, but within the context of being in a community with one another, where we make room for other ideas, things that don't look like what we're used to, and the visions that we believe in. Because there's a quote: "Nothing will fuel you more than the power of telling a story you believe in." Mr. Will said that to us at our rap party, for not our rap party, but the day we rapped on set for King Richard. And I remember he said that, and I was like, "That's it is. That's the responsibility as an artist. Do we believe in the thing we're telling
Right.
unabashedly?" And I think that's what's so cool about the content that you do create, be it on TikTok or with Lockjaw Productions. Even with this podcast, right? You're making room for a very specific vision that doesn't like it's not like it's just for you, right? But in making room for your vision, you're room for so many other people to step in and be a part of this thing that you want to build and create and put out into the world. And that is what community looks like.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be really important for somebody, you know?
Yeah. And my goal too is just to be able to really work on it and not be like, okay, because this is what happens. Temporal context gets me sometimes because I'm like, oh, look what's happening in the world right now. It needs to happen now. I need to make sure I get this out before the time has passed.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be relevant. Like, history repeats itself anyway. It's gonna be relevant, and so
Whenever it comes out.
whenever it comes out. So I've let that go, and I'm just grateful that I've been able to like build something up and work on something and have a really like not stressful planning phase, just taking my time and like learning and educating myself and learning from others who've done this before. Like, I've already learned a lot from you in terms of the podcasting, and I can't wait to keep going with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've been very inspiring, and just like the fact that I can always learn. Like, I always learn from my friends, and you know, just the fact that there's just all the time in the world. We made this shit up anyway. We made
making this shit up as we go, you know? And I think that's what growth looks like, right? Is understanding that if we maintain this culture, this willingness to like die to ourselves, you know, like die on our own hills, die on our own swords, then we're making room for ourselves to grow, change, and evolve in ways we would have never imagined before.
Exactly.
And that's like that culture of learning, that desire to be able to let go of something you believed previously to make room for what you understand to be true for you right now. Surrounding yourself with like not just the artists that you want to be like, but the people you want to be like, and letting them inform like, okay, wow, this is the kind of person I want to be. And I think that's really cool. It's really nice to be able to bear witness to what this journey that like looks like for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. We have, what is it? The next question, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the Ghanaian proverb Sankofa is a term that reminds us it's okay to stop at any point in our journey and return to a place we've already passed to go back and get anything we may have left behind. So I'm curious if you can name a moment in your life where you had to Sankofa or go back and get it.
So this one kind of shakes me up a little bit because there's just something about me. I guess it's my anxiety or what have you that I've often mentioned to close friends, and I guess it's time to be honest that I have a hard time like standing up for myself sometimes. Like, I have a hard time because I grew up the middle child of 5, and in this environment of like people pleaser, just straight to trying to like cater to people and all that stuff. I feel like sometimes when I have my own opinion, it's either I convince myself that it's too unclear, or I'm just like, oh no, like, ugh, I can't say that because I don't feel like hearing what might come after that. I don't feel like confronting the potential of what comes next when I voice something that is set aside from what I've heard in the space so far. So there was a moment where I really had to confront that in my family with like things that are going on with my siblings, and just like I'm like, I have to stand up for myself here because number one, we don't make any progress as a family if I don't. I've been in this spot all my life trying to piece everything together, trying to mediate, trying to do things to make sure things fit, trying to make sure people get to where they need to be and all that type of stuff. And I've just got a lot of stuff going on like in this era with my siblings, and trying to like figure out how to like where relationships stand, because we grew up pretty close, and when you get to a moment where it's like the first moment in your life where you're not as close with one of your siblings, and it's confusion about what happened, and then you get to the moment where you all are actually talking about it.
Yeah.
And there was a moment where I was just like, well, it was a first conversation. I didn't stand up for myself in that moment. I just kind of let it go by when I was addressing with my brother, like, what's been going on, like, what's tea, what, like, I
Yeah.
don't
Harm.
clarify for me what's going on here.
Yeah.
And I got the chance to, and then there's always the thing where you exit a conversation, and for days, weeks, months, years, whatever, afterwards, you think about what you could have said, or you think about, like, it grows it within you. But I knew in some of those moments that I should have stood up for myself here and said this, because it is what it is. And so I had the opportunity again a couple months ago to have another conversation, and I really stood up for myself. I was proud. I was actually really proud that I was just like, okay, I learned from that first time where I just kind of let it go by, and then we're sitting in this awkward, dull space, and it's still murky. It's still unclear. And the second time rolls around, and I'm like, I know what I have to do. Like, we're not, and also, like, I could pinpoint the manipulation that was happening, and I'm like, okay, first of all, what we're not going to do, for example, is we're not going to villainize tears, because there's nothing wrong with crying. Like, sometimes I'm just like an emotional person, so I'm just like, I'm still going to speak my truth with this water on my face.
Or how it comes out.
Right, you're gonna listen or you're not gonna listen. But the point is, I'm saying real words right here, and that doesn't take away from that fact. So I've really learned from moments where it just felt so painful. It felt painful to the point where I knew I couldn't keep doing that. And that's something that I go back to and remember, that this pain is unnecessary. Like, some pains are necessary. That pain just felt like I was putting it on myself that time. And I was like, some pains are unnecessary, and you learn, and you sometimes, like, because it's not linear, sometimes it might happen again. But I'm just like, yeah, that was really, really important for me. Like, realizing that, okay, you have to stand up for yourself. It's actually going to be to like work in your favor for standing up. You're going to feel like such a release. I felt such a release after doing that. So that's probably one of the biggest ones, going back and learning from when I didn't stand up for myself, and taking that and rectifying it when I got the chance to do it again.
I love that, especially because it means like you didn't have to beat yourself up about the fact that you didn't do it the first time around. It just gave you a new opportunity to be more informed about how you wanted to deal with it that time around.
Exactly.
You know,
try this again.
Yeah. And making room to like address harm with family is hard. So I'm really happy for you, because I know that's terrifying, and like I would want to spontaneously combust and throw up all at once.
Right.
when doing stuff like that. But it can redefine and make room for you to engage with them in a different way. So good on you.
Yeah, it's very interesting with family, because it's like a lot of us grow up with hearing that family is supposed to be, supposed to continuously forgive them, like, and you're supposed to be close. Why aren't you close with such and such? You guys are family, and we're all just humans. Sure, we came from the same coochie ding dong, but I'm just like, we're different people.
Relationship isn't like healthy or sustainable, then we have to reconfigure how we engage. We can't rely on these toxic like relationship dynamics that we're expected to be around each other and love each other and ignore harms just because we're family. It's like, no, let's do something different.
Yeah, I love the way that Jeanette McCurdy talks about this in her podcast and in her book. I'm glad my mom died. I don't know if you've read her book.
I haven't read it. I do own it. I haven't read it yet, and I know they're trying to make it into some sort of series.
Yeah, she's doing like I think she's also doing like a podcast series that's going to expand.
Very cool.
I started listening to it the other day, and she's basically talking about things that she mentions in the book. But that's like one of her biggest things, like the fact that she had to really push herself to go no contact with family members, because you're just pressured to take this harm. And it's just like, no, I'm going to protect myself because when the day is done, it's just me and me.
Yeah. At the
So
end of the day.
I would rather protect myself than just make it seem like, oh, everything is nice and dandy here, and it's not, and we don't.
And I'm not about to fake the funk for what?
Right.
I like in the last few years, my mom and I are incredibly close, but we're also very similar, so we butt heads. I've had to kind of reconfigure what my relationship with her looks like. Because in our family dynamic, my from my some of my aunts and uncles to my dad and my sister, they're just like, no, you let her be, you let it be, like stop pushing her, stop poking her, stop antagonizing her, and it's just like, but that's not what I'm doing. And we've been in such a beautiful place in our relationship now that I've just kind of reconvened on like when I'm willing to talk to her, how much time am I willing to let her take up, as well as how much time do I have the capacity to invest? Do I have the emotional capacity to have this conversation with her about this thing, or do I actually have to set a boundary or a limit? And it's been a really weird adjustment for us, and I don't think she likes it. I don't think she recognizes what it is. But like you said, it's really helpful to sustain ourselves, right? Because at the end of the day, who are we looking at in the mirror? This one, this person right here. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's true.
So as we move on to our final question, then I think this is really exciting because you were talking about how like you're left with you and you, me and me, like that kind of thing. For Jaska, I am sure you are aware that Black women in films in the arts are often gatekept from positions of power, authority, privilege, and platform. So, I'm wondering what are some ways you would encourage your younger self as you navigate an industry and world not built to love on you?
So I really love this question, by the way. I think it's important for people to answer this question for themselves, for Black women in films to really take this in. Besides all the aspects of growing up that I did not like, first of all, I had to move away from only looking at the negative parts of my upbringing and really embrace what went right. I was like, I'm really grateful for these specific things that went right. And something that I was very grateful for was I was always encouraged to be a leader. And like leadership, especially for me, was always encouraged because it was just something that my parents saw in me and the things that I did growing up and my interests. And so they were very encouraging of like that leadership quality. It's just like, yeah, go for it. Like writing things, like my mom is an artist as well and she loves to paint, and so she would paint words on my wall that I could wake up and see every morning that are just like encouraging me.
Affirmations.
Right? Yes, literally. Literally, the root of my affirmation journey was my mom painting things on my wall when I was a kid, like, oh, God has plans for you, and you are destined for greatness. You are going to be a leader. You are successful, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah. So I've always had that chance to keep repeating that to myself and just growing up with that. But then when I got outside of the household and I saw how the world was working and how, oh, this might be what I'm destined for, but it's not so easy. Like I can't just like step into that. And there are certain strategies I'm going to have to use in order for me to like hang in there because I'm sitting here like because I was homeschooled for most of elementary school and middle school. And when I finally went to public school for high school, I got out there and I felt a little slow at first. Somebody was like, somebody at my high school was like, you're really smart, but you have no street smarts. Like, you are slow.
Same.
Yes,
to this day.
To this day, right. I still am missing a couple social cues, but we pick them up where we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I got out into the world and it was just like, oh, you're a leader, but it's gonna be some pushback. Like the spaces were actually kind of made to push you out. So not that you can't wiggle yourself in there, but you might have to like push through that door.
Right.
I'm just like, oh, like I didn't realize that for a long time because it was a lot of like you got this and you will do it, which is great. But also, yeah, I just had to come to the fact that I have to employ some strategies like for myself that I'm just going to have to take with me on the outside when I'm not at home, when I'm not like it's not just me telling myself that all the time. So something I would tell to my younger self, specifically like that young high schooler who felt slow, who felt like so confused about like the world looking so different than and not mirroring my home life and like that encouragement coming from inside the home.
Mm.
I would say like there would be points where I would try to go to a certain point with something and then I would fall back. I'm just like I'm not sure that this is going to work out. Like I'm
Yeah.
not sure. It doesn't. The odds do not look in my favor. Like I was on that wave sometimes, and I think that I would tell my younger self specifically to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because
Mm.
something that I learned in acting school was that really kind of blew my mind. Even though now it feels like a really simple concept, is that being like in a place of discomfort is healthy. Being in a place where you feel endangered is not healthy. So
Yep.
you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But when you get to that point where it's dangerous, then you know. Then you fall back. But I was falling back at every point when I was coming up to that discomfort. I'm like, ooh, ooh. And I guess I would encourage my younger self to just like go through that point of discomfort where it feels like there's no way, where it just feels like there's not a chance in hell that you will be the person that's chosen or will be the person that creates a spot for yourself. Like with all the things going on, you still create a spot for yourself. It feels uncomfortable going through the process because you're really not familiar with process. You're
Yeah.
familiar with people talking about the destination that you.
Product. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just like that. The only reason why you're not comfortable is because it's just unfamiliar. But that doesn't mean that you're unsafe.
And you
So
so much in discomfort, right? Like in discomfort, there's this nexus of revelation where you learn something new that like you can take with you or you can leave it behind. You can leave it right there if it's not going to serve you. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
yeah, that's a big one because I just feel like there's a lot of room for growth. Just like you said, like there's a lot of room for growth in that area. Like you
Mhm.
get to figure out like something that you might not have known before. Like sometimes I would come up to like nowadays I come up to a spot where I feel that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have known that this I felt some type of way about this thing.
Yeah.
But now that I'm here, yeah, it's like now that I'm here, I can ask myself questions. I can like really give myself that encouragement to move forward and like see what I need to do to keep myself sane as I'm moving forward.
Exactly. And I think for me, as like a recovering know it all, like that's been so helpful,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is to be able to just very openly and freely say, I did not know shit yesterday, much less when I was in college, way much less than I was when I was in high school. And, all the way back to day one, December 15th, 1994, 6:36 p.m. Like,
Yeah.
I have learned so much from being able to admit that in uncomfortable situations historically, I shut down. And now that I'm trying to unlearn that process, that habit, there's so much more for me to understand about myself and the world around me. And it feels like it makes the space safer, when I'm willing to be uncomfortable for a little bit in the name of understanding or realizing or acquiring some sort of new information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's that new information, that feeling that when I absorb that new information, it feels like, wow, this was all worth it anyway.
Yes, yeah. It was like, okay, I guess, bitch, I hated it here, but okay. I hope I
Right.
don't have to go through this again. God damn.
That was a little filthy, bitch, but we.
It was gross. It was disgusting. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Please stop.
Right. Let's not.
Move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Wow, I really, really appreciated these questions, and I really enjoy being able to tap into some of the things that, woof, like some of the honesty that I'm really trying to encourage myself to share because, you know, I've been talking about this recently with other friends too, and it's just like it's hard to be honest.
It is.
Honest, and you have
Sometimes
to.
I feel like I'm honest to a fault. Like I should shut the fuck up. So
I was just about to say, like, there's a balance that you have to have because sometimes it's like, oh, I can be as honest as as it takes.
that has bit me in the ass many a time before. God damn. Sheesh.
I mean, understandable. Like, sometimes, like my little sister probably would say the same thing as you said. She's a Capricorn, so she
Got it.
is like, she's like, what do I do about the fact that I overshare so much? I'm like, I can't relate. I don't.
I'm just I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm a little too forward.
Yes, I'm just like that. Yeah.
I mean, like, that's just the facts of life. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, that's just, why can't I say that? I remember my mom, like, to this day, my mom hates when I discuss the fact that I have bipolar disorder in public. And I don't really discuss it much at all now, just because it just so happens to be a part of my life, but it does not define me. You know what I mean? But she used to be like, you can't, like, you're not going to get jobs. People not going to employ you. People don't want to be your friends. All of this kind of stuff. And she believes it to this day.
Oh, wow.
And I know it's coming from a place where she's just desperately trying to protect her child. And it also has indeed bit me in the ass before, where I've had like a friend turn on me and try to utilize or weaponize that aspect of my mental health against me. And you know what? Though it did feel like it bit me ass in like that moment, it also gave me the revelation that that friend was not a friend, and I did not need them in my life no more. Right?
Right. That's an important.
Yeah. So sometimes I'm just like, yeah, maybe the world didn't need to know that. You know, maybe I could have kept that to myself. But like I said, I'm a Sagittarius. I got a big ass mouth. I talk too much. I'm working every single day.
So you're a perfect guest for a podcast.
Yeah,
And a
probably.
perfect
Probably. Word on the street.
Okay, so we're going to move into our last and final section, which we're going to talk about too, because originally I had a game called Old TV Big Three. We are, of course, in the midst of SAG after strike right now. And for our listeners and viewers who don't know, that is the Actors Union for Film and Television Actors. They are on strike, and everyone needs better conditions, okay? I was talking to my acting teacher that was yesterday. And he was just talking about how, like, unfortunately the deliberations aren't looking that great. He's on one of the committees, and
I'm not very hopeful right now. I'm not gonna hold you.
yeah, it's sad to me, but I'm just like, I want SAG to really keep fighting, and I'm also really proud of like what happened like after the writer's strike in terms of SAG being like, okay, that was beautiful.
That was cute.
Yeah, as they should, but it's just like, don't think we're just gonna bow to whatever you just present in front of us.
Shit ain't sweet over here. I don't know why you trying to play in my face.
With the demands about AI and about like streaming residuals and like when revenue pops off and actors really need a cut of when a show gets successful, like that's just common sense. So like,
we're the ones that make this story happen. You know what I mean? Like without writers, we have no words to say, and without us, we have no show.
Right. So, what are you looking at? Nothing.
Like, baby, what do you mean? if you guys don't want to pay us, then stop streaming.
Right.
Yeah. If you guys don't want to pay us, don't go to the movie theater. If you guys don't want to pay us, don't log on to social media. Don't look at our content.
Exactly.
Right? And so, I think the game is still really dope. I think something I've been trying really hard to do in a time where everyone's like, "Oh, you're on a contract, you're working on something, are you scabbing?" Like that kind of energy. Where I've just been trying to be dead ass about like not just talking about it, but being about it. Because financially, I could not afford to continue going to the strike lines. When I say I spent over $2,000 just in gas money, getting back and forth to the strike lines initially. In the first couple months of the strike, and I was like, I cannot sustain this.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I was flying back and forth coast to coast, trying to work survival jobs and miscellaneous contracts and workshopping new works and putting on like different events and shit, just trying to get by and make sure my rent was paid.
Right.
Almost missed it a couple times. And I was like, okay, so if I can't afford to be out there day, uh, that's one thing. I also wanted to reimagine what it looked like to have a black body on the strike lines every single day. And I was like, you know what? Actually, I feel like white people should be walking on my behalf right now, because at the end of the day, the strike is disproportionately impacting artists of color and marginalized artists, queer artists, disabled artists, because we're going to have a really fucking hard time when the rooms open back up and they try to silo us off again and remind us there's only, 2 or 3 roles to split between 2 or 3 people, because there are only apparently 2 or 3 black women that they are willing to acknowledge exist in Hollywood, right? So I was like, I'm gonna let Sally and Karen and Larissa, y'all can be, yes, oh my gosh, hold up your sign. You better yell at them, girl.
Make that noise. Get those honks.
Yes, please, please. Because at the end of the day, guess what? I know your mama and daddy is paying your rent, and good for you. I'm so happy that that's an option for you. But I have to protect my peace. And so I was like, okay, that just means I really can't engage with anything, any content. I have not watched a TV show. I am not up to date on our work outside of like indie content. I ain't dressed up as shit as Halloween, just like they told me not to. I am being but I'll be completely transparent. The only way I'm watching reality TV is if I'm ripping it off the internet, because you don't need my views, right? I need to illegally acquire my access to Real Housewives of New York currently. And I don't even like reality TV like that. Shit, says the girl who used to host a podcast about how racist The Bachelor is, or used to be, or is. I digress. I don't even like reality TV like that. But I was like, I can't, unless it's like independently produced, I cannot engage. And that's the way I've been able to show up in this space as an artist who's been financially kind of ass beat, like pummeled, fucked up, ruined, set back by this strike. We're what 120 days in, if not more.
A little more, I think.
And I know that even when we get this deal, it's going to be hard for me to get back into rooms. It's going to be a slow start. And I'm feeling the financial, mental, emotional, and physical turmoil of that. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to like have been able to reach out to you and be like, hey, I love the old TV Big Three, but I can't engage with it right now. Just because I wanna honor the fact that I am currently on strike. And this is one of a few ways I've been able to show up for it in space as someone who can't be on the strike lines every single day.
Yeah, and I definitely really appreciated you for bringing that up. And it's not to be like this big thing about it, but it's admirable because another, like, kind of to circle back to what we were talking about at the beginning with social media, being on the front lines, like in front of the studios with picket signs is something that you can take a picture of and post on social media.
You could go out. I've seen people go out there, grab a sign, take a picture, and go home. I've watched that happen.
Exactly. So it's just like what you're saying is very, very true in terms of. And I also had this conversation with someone on Facebook yesterday, actually. I'm like, I shouldn't comment, but I want to comment so bad. But anyway, because they were like, I'm not taking any Broadway gigs, and that's on, we're on strike. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to engage in this conversation a little bit. But anyway, we were just talking about different ways to show solidarity. And I just really think that if you're boycotting TV shows, if you're boycotting the streaming services, that's a lot of movement in terms of the strike. Going to the front line, yes, you're making noise, and yes, you can potentially, it's news coverage, is this and that.
Yeah.
But I feel like this boycotting that people are encouraging with the strike, also with other things like what's going on in Palestine and all these brands people are boycotting and stuff, and really seeing a shift of things happening. I feel like if you don't have the financial pot to be able to be out here not working survival jobs and just studios with a picket sign all the time, arguably that's doing a lot more anyway. So it's like,
yeah, and I think it brings us back to this notion of what is performance and what is active co-conspiratorship, what is being an active change agent, what is standing in solidarity, and also what is it to be an activist for the revolution you seek to see and the things that impact you as well. Because for some people, going on the strike lines is exactly what they can do right now. For some people, that's the best thing, their best way forward. And that's okay. It's not the best way for me to show up in space right now. So how do we make room for both? How do we evaluate both? And also, how can we make sure we're being impactful and intentional about both, right?
It's a way for being, out on the picket lines to be very valuable and very impactful.
The numbers are important, right?
It's so important.
Take up space, disrupt. Go ahead, make it inconvenient for the girls to get to work.
Right. Not only but I feel like I've been really informed about, because I went on the picket lines a couple times, but I feel like I was really informed by hearing people be interviewed out there.
Yeah.
Direct perspectives, because I'm not in SAG myself yet, but I was there because hopefully one day
one day you will be.
I will be. And also, even if not, I'm out here.
That's with the work.
I'm out here doing this. I'm out here doing this stuff, and I really care about it. So it's just when I was out there, and also for the interviews that I saw on social media, I was like, this is a direct perspective. And also my acting teacher, because he's really in the thick of things, I'm like, these direct perspectives are really, really helpful. There's really, really impactful.
Sorry, there was hair in my mouth.
That new hairdo. Hair.
I'm not even gonna hold you. I don't think that was mine. I think that might have been a dog hair. But continue, sorry.
Well, that's okay. That's just what I'm saying. I feel like for both sides, they're both very valuable. There's just people have to watch out sometimes, because there's a way on both ends to be performative, and so
it's how can you be informed? There are so many, I think people forget this about the notion of advocacy and there are so many different ways for us to enter into space. There are so many different ways for us to advocate for a thing that we believe in. And sometimes what is required of us, especially those of us who take up space in disenfranchised bodies, is to do the thing that is going to allow us to sustain ourselves through to the end, right? Because we live in a linearly modeled world, right? So we go from point A to point B to point C, and we're looking for a result on the other end of this. But how can I do it and come out on the other side whole, how can I engage authentically and make sure that I'm hitting them where it hurts on my end if I can't be on the strike lines every day, right? How can I be amplifying the work of independent artists? How can I also discover other shit that can sustain me in this process? This is essentially the second industry-wide shutdown we've had in our very short careers. I feel like I've been in this game for like a long time, right? But it's like I am a baby in this industry. I am a child, newborn, just came out of the hoo-ha compared to some of the other artists that I'm in community with. So how can I make sure I am making room for myself to survive and engage artfully and fuck shit up so that things are different for the people who are coming up after me?
Yeah.
You know?
That's very important. And I feel like I'm sitting here like, nope, that's period.
So
Mic drop. So yeah, I think this conversation has been very fruitful to me. I'm very, very thankful that you have joined me today in this conversation. I would love if you can tell the audience and our listeners where, what you're doing, if there's anything you want to amplify or any, you talked about Broadway Advocacy Coalition, anything you want to amplify so our listeners can find out and be on top of it themselves. We'd love to hear it.
For sure. I mean, people on the interwebs can find me on Instagram and Threads. I'm not really super active up there now. You'll see me pop in here and there, but it's at Carpeing Diem. That's at CarpeingDiem. Don't at me. I came up with it when I was probably in like the 9th grade, and I'm never going to change my Instagram name. It's just not going to happen. But a lot of people try to follow me at MiKayla Bartholomew on Instagram, and that page is truly for just my friends and family. So don't be offended when I don't accept the request. At Carpeing Diem is where you can engage with me directly. I'm the most active on there. I do work with the Broadway Advocacy Coalition. I am in the process of renegotiating my contract, though. So, fingers crossed, I've been working with them for about 5 years, since 2018. Yeah, I love the work that they do over there. I really believe in them, and they've got some really cool things coming up. So, if folks are curious about that work, feel free to follow them on Instagram at B-Way Advocacy Coalition. And for me, I am currently on a theatrical contract, a theater contract. We're doing the world premiere of a new play, which I can't remember when this is going to come out, so our show might be closed by then, but it's called The Salvagers by Harrison David Rivers, directed by Michael Burke, at the Yale Repertory Theater in New Haven, Connecticut. We go into previews on Black Friday, which is fun because it's a Black show. But for once, we're telling a Black show about Black people, and it's not about race or oppression or the trauma that comes with being Black in America. It's just a story about the shit that we go through, and love and grief and forgiveness, and how that takes up space in our bodies, and how we're not necessarily monolithic in the ways we've been portrayed in the theatrical canon as per our history. We start November 24th and we close December 16th. So if people want to come see the show, great. Otherwise, maybe you'll see when the show goes elsewhere, if it goes elsewhere.
I'm definitely trying to get out there, and it sounds...
Please, I'll get you a comp so you don't even have to, pay for your ticket. For sure. Just hit me up. Mm-hmm.
I'll hit you up with the date. Natalie's trying to come with me too. So actually,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All because I can't the Grace screening I can't make. So hopefully Natalie will be able to come up, and if you guys come together, I'll just comp both of your tickets.
Okay. I'm gonna talk to her right after this.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on 23, 24, 25. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This has just been so lovely. And next week, we'll be talking all about 25 for the last episode. But I might say this every time, but the last episode is going to be a solo episode. So you get to hear me just bear it all, and you won't want to miss that. So, yeah, see you guys there. Bye.
Yeah, peace.
23, 24, 25 is a podcast produced and hosted by Joska. Graphic design by Joska. Executive producer, director of photography, and editor, Dante Charles Critchlow. Music by Fadal Moore. A special thanks to Anthony and Celintia Moore, Constance Moore, and Harold Hickson for their contributions to production. And a special thanks to viewers like you who create the community of my wildest dreams. Thank you.
23, 24, 25 TV.